I was at the Main Street Gym, and then he was Cassius Clay, but Ali was training at the Main Street Gym, which was a very historic gym in downtown Los Angeles on Skid Row. He fought 3 fights at the Los Angeles Sports Arena, and I'm holding this little Zenith transistor radios. And Ali looked down at me and he said, "What you got in your hand?" And I says, "This is a transistor radio." He says, "No kidding." He says, "Will you follow me over to my hotel? I got a wire recorder. I want to try something. I want to see if I can record music on my wire recorder." So I followed him to the Alexandria Hotel, and that's where the fighters used to stay, and it was about 2.5 blocks from the gym. And he walked into his bedroom and he comes out with his wire recorder and he starts the thing up, and then he put my radio by it. Then he replayed it, and he heard the music, and he says, "Yeah, this is great. I'm going to get me one of those." He says, "What do you do?" I says, "Well, I want to be a publicist." He says, "Oh, well, let me show you something about publicity." He walks into his bedroom, and he brings out, literally, this coffee table scrapbook. Ali was a publicist's dream. You didn't have to beg him, "Please, Ali, will you do this? Please, will you do that?" Because not only would he do everything you asked him to do, he would think up things. If he wasn't a fighter, he probably would have been the greatest publicity man in history. He was at one time the most famous person on earth. Not fighter, not athlete, he was the most famous person on earth. Now, I've been to 5 or 6 different places with Ali when he was fighting. And if he would walk out on the street, not yelling or waving his arms or anything, he'd draw an immediate crowd. He was absolutely amazing. I was always a fight fan. I used to listen to the great Joe Louis fights on the radio before there was television. In the living room with my dad on that old Philco console radio. Joe Louis was my boyhood hero. There was a Beverly Hills builder who came from a big real estate company in New York. It was called Sam Minskoff and Sons. And my brother-in-law, my mentor, talked them into promoting boxing. And he lied to him about my experience, that I took journalism in college, which I didn't do, and that I had done PR and blah, 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 and I got hired. It's our job to get free space in the newspapers, on radio and television, in the magazines, and so on. In other words, not paid advertising space, but to let people know about our fights so they'll watch them on TV, they'll buy tickets for the fight if they're local, they'll buy pay-per-view tickets and try and make the fighters that we use famous. When George Foreman was 18 years old and he was an amateur, his 6th amateur fight, and I was the ring announcer and the publicist at these fights, and he had had 6 fights and scored 6 knockouts. George was a great street fighter. He fought a guy that was a professional amateur that had been in amateur tournaments throughout the world. So George came out, it was 3 2-minute rounds. George came out in the first round just winging, boom, 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 boom. At the end of the first round, George was out of gas. Kind of like he was out of gas when he fought Ali in Zaire. And it was an easy fight to score. George lost the fight. I walked back to the dressing room, and here is this 18-year-old George Foreman sitting on the rubbing table, and his chin was literally on his chest. I says, "George, what's the matter?" He says, "I'm going to quit boxing." I gave him a pat on the shoulder, and I says, "Hey, don't worry about it, George. You're going to be a good fighter someday." And when he wrote his best-selling autobiography, By George, he talked about that, and what he said was, this celebrity named Bill Caplan came back to the dressing room, and I was going to quit boxing, but he talked me out of it and said I was going to be a good fighter someday. I says, "George, why would you call me a celebrity?" He says, "Well, first of all, you were wearing a tuxedo." Remember, I was a ring announcer. "And you were pointing your finger and yelling and telling people what to do." He says, "I thought you owned the arena. I thought you owned this place." It was the Oakland Municipal Auditorium. I says, "Well, now I understand. This is an 18-year-old kid," and that was his view. Don King was Ernie Shaver's manager, and Ernie Shavers was a huge puncher. Well, Ernie Shavers fought this 5'11", 185-pound white kid from California by the name of Jerry Quarry. Quarry knocked him out in the Garden in the first or second round, and King decided he didn't want to be a manager anymore, he wanted to be a promoter. So two guys named Barry Bernstein and Hank Schwartz had made this deal in Africa for Ali and Foreman. I worked for him. And one day they said to me, you know, we're going to hire Don King as our second vice president because we need a black presence. We're going to Africa. We were supposed to be there for 10 days. We were there for 2 months. That was that was the all-time adventure of my long career, was being in Africa for 2 months with Ali and Foreman. But anyway, King flew out from Cleveland one day to see George and talk to George and visit with him. In between, he came up to my hotel room and he was using the bathroom. And his hair was normal at the time. And he came out of the bathroom and he had used a pick to pick his hair straight up in the air. He says, what do you think if I wore my hair like this? And he would always say, because remember, he was new as a promoter, he would always say, make me big, Bill, make me big. And so when he's doing that thing and the hair's sticking up the way we know him, I said, well, people will notice you. Now he tells all the stories about how somehow it's an electric thing and his hair is reaching for the heaven and the whole thing. And that's how King got his hair to go straight up. We all went to Africa, Ali's camp and Foreman's camp. And they were getting a $5 million guarantee in 1974, completely unheard of. It was huge money because the dictator, President Mobutu Sese Seko, put up the money that he had pilfered from the country. Ali was in his 30s, and George was, what was he then, about 23, 24 years old. And he had knocked out Kenny Norton, who had broken Ali's jaw. He had knocked out Joe Frazier, who had beaten Ali at Madison Square Garden in that famous fight, and George knocked them both out easily in 2 rounds. And people were praying that Ali doesn't get killed. Well, anybody that knows anything about boxing knows the result, and George suffered his first defeat and got stopped in the 8th round. King is amazing. He has made the world believe that he put that whole show together. He was hired by these guys after it was all done, but the world thinks that he did the whole thing. Anyway, I worked with him for a year and a half, and then I went to Bob Arum. Now, the rivalry between the two was fantastic. They needed each other, and allegedly hated each other, but they would do business together. And then when Oscar De La Hoya and some of the other promoters came on the scene, the two old guys, I think they're the same age, united and became friends. When De La Hoya won the gold medal in Barcelona, he immediately signed with Bob Arum at Top Rank. So my experience with De La Hoya has been since the beginning of his professional career. And I have to tell you, my 2 all-time favorite fighters to work with, De La Hoya and Foreman. Those are the 2. So I'm very fortunate working with him now. Who are my list of clients? I told you about Don King and Bob Arum and Oscar De La Hoya. I also do some work for K2, the Klitschko organization. I've worked on Klitschko fights, currently worked on Triple G's fights, Golovkin. Triple G, in my not so humble opinion, is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Triple G is a beast, and he's only going to get better. You go ahead and name any fighter from 154 to 168 pounds that can beat him. I can't think of anybody. I think he's the best fighter in the world. Marvin Hagler was a tough SOB. And not only was he an exceptional fighter, and he came from an age where the middleweights were king. And there was a book, a bestseller that was written by George Kimball called The Four Kings, about the four middleweights, Hagler and Duran and Tommy Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard. They all fought each other, they all fought at the same time. And I went to Tommy Hearns' training camp at Caesars. And Hearns, a 6 foot, 2 inch, 147 pounder, unheard of. From the waist up, he's like a light heavyweight, puncher, boxer, boom, boom. He's hitting the bag and he's hitting Emanuel Stewart's mitts. Then I go to Sugar Ray Leonard's training camp, also at Caesars. And here's Sugar Ray Leonard, average height for a welterweight, small bone, little wrists, little ankles, little, almost looked like, how could you put this guy in with this guy? Well, it was one of the classic welterweight fights of all time, where Leonard actually got a detached retina in the fight. Hearns was beating him from pillar to post, and Leonard would not quit and came out and knocked out Hearns in the 13th round. And that's when I knew that Sugar Ray Leonard was really special. A lot of stuff now is Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the other stuff. And of course, the newspapers are not as powerful or plentiful as they used to be. So that's the way it's changed. But I think people hire me because I still do it the old-fashioned way. Yes, I do emails. No, I don't Twitter. No, I don't Facebook. It's all about, personal relationships. I mean, my best friends outside of my family are people in the media. They're my best personal friends. And that's the way I operate. It's the old-fashioned way. Who is Bill Caplan? Just a guy, with 5 kids and 10 grandchildren, who enjoys his family, who enjoys boxing, who never plans to retire, as long as, like I say, I got 51 years in the business, as long as guys are silly enough to hire me like Oscar and the rest of them, I'll be there. And literally, I plan to die in the saddle. Retirement is not in my vocabulary. I can say it now, but it's not in my plans.